Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I already know that every single one of you is absolutely going to love today's guest and featured entrepreneur because not only does she have incredible energy, not only is she brilliant, but I will say, as someone who has studied her work before getting together with her here today, I am so in awe at her attitude, her strategy, her execution, and really her view towards business growth. And I think it can really be summed up. I fell in love with her work just with 3 simple words that I saw her articulate somewhere, and it said, growth isn't guesswork. Ooh, I love that, and I feel like that sets the scene. So let me introduce you to today's guest. Her name is Jen Manswell. Jen is a revenue growth architect and the CEO of Mylene Consulting. For more than 20 years, she's been helping companies unlock over $100 million in new revenue, not by chasing trends, but by designing systems that make growth repeatable, scalable, and rooted in real customer trust. Her background spans marketing, sales, and demand generation, which gives her a unique perspective that growth doesn't come from one department, it comes from the way the entire business works together. Jen partners with executives, founders, and investors to align strategy, spark momentum, and build revenue engines that actually deliver. And when I talk about Jen's energy, I had the chance to interact with her a little bit off the air before we hit record, and what sets her apart is her mix of creativity, clarity, and candor. She's just as comfortable in the boardroom as she is sparking fresh ideas over coffee. Her work has been described as equal parts architect, coach, and storyteller, and she brings that blend of discipline and personality into every project she leads. At the heart of it all, she believes that business should be smart, human, and yes, a little bit of fun, and she's never afraid to bring a touch of sass to the process. So I'm excited about this one. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Jen Manswell. All right, Jen, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Brian. I am happy to be here.
It is such a treat to have you here. And obviously, I see a lot of bios. I see a lot of LinkedIn profiles. I see a lot of websites. Jen, I love your bio. I feel like it showcases so many cool things that you do. So you've got to take us beyond the bio. Who's Jen? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Well, it's interesting. I had a vice president of marketing tell me once, number one, nobody ever died of a marketing crisis, which actually keeps me quite grounded. But secondly, he also talked about the fact that my career would never be linear, right? So I actually started in the performing arts world, which is actually a form of communication. Then I transitioned through my master's program, into a more of a focus on advertising and public relations, concentrating on multicultural and global communications. And then I kept getting really great jobs, fantastic opportunities on the service side at an ad agency, multicultural ad agency, where I really learned strategy, that tactics do not begin at all without a strategy in mind. And then transferred that into 15 years in the corporate America space, working in industrial manufacturing corporations, et cetera, et cetera. And now I am here. Now I own my own company. I own a few companies actually, but I own this company as my priority. And I'm really, really excited to serve our customer base as they seek help with their revenue architecting goals.
Yes, I love that overview, Jen, but I'm going to call out for a lot of people, revenue architecture is a new term. Everybody talks about marketing, everybody talks about sales and conversion optimization, and of course everybody wants more revenue and more profit, but what the heck is revenue architecture? I love the structure that lends itself in the way that we view revenue.
Right. Well, the concept of revenue architecting is oriented around being smart about creating scalable, repeatable, and predictable revenue systems. So instead of relying on your referrals or your little black book when you are building a company and or trying to get more business out of existing customers, you would think through a system that attracts, nurtures, closes and scales all of your sales opportunities from start to finish. There's also the aspect of diversifying your approach to revenue. You may have one path, but there are other paths that you perhaps haven't considered that you can create in that scalable system. And ultimately, how do you accelerate the close? In other words, are you optimizing the offers that you're extending to your customers so that it reduces the sales cycle? So the whole concept is creating this beautiful blueprint that can be followed from soup to nuts all the way through the sale and is completely trackable.
Yeah, I love that, especially because I'm someone that I love frameworks. And I will tell you, Jen, that in my daily interactions with wantrepreneurs and entrepreneurs, everybody seems to convince themselves that they are so unique. You know, we're all told since we're kids, you are so unique. They convince themselves that they're so unique that there are no patterns that they can follow, that their business or their product or service or their business model is so different that they have to chart their own course. But it sounds to me like you really come back to the fundamentals, the proofs, the formulas that you can follow that are, as you call out, which I think should be all of our goals, predictable, not just those trends. Talk to us about some of those patterns and foundational elements.
Well, the thing is even in your uniqueness, to your point, Brian, you still can follow the fundamentals, right? And the truth of the matter is if you set up the fundamentals in a fashion that moves forward like an engine, you can concentrate on extending or offering all of the beautiful, unique things that are appropriate for you once you know who your customer is. So the framework for revenue architecting begins with marketing. Most people think of marketing as a cost center, right? Something that they just spend money on, and they hear about click rates and impressions and they think to themselves, but I'm not getting anything out of it. But there are ways to set up your marketing activity in a fashion that is trackable, and it follows from your marketing arm over to your sales organization, because the marketing activity would allow you or result in prospects that trigger or illustrate that, hey, I'm ready to purchase. You transition over to your sales organization that takes those prospects through a vetting strategy or a vetting system, whatever that is for the appropriate customer. And you connect that framework to our finance organization. Many people think to themselves, well, why do you involve finance in this? Isn't this just marketing? Actually, it's not. It is marketing being used as a lever for bringing your prospects in. But it has to be done in a way that is formulaic so that the sales organization can follow those steps. And then the involvement of finance is where you put your money where your mouth is, right? You say to the finance organization, if there are any tactics that I'm doing that doesn't work, I'm going to let it go. But if there are any tactics that are doing well and accelerating the rate at which I build my pipeline, then I need you to fund it. What that means is that the executive leadership of the organization is going to then start to value your marketing effort as a business strategy as opposed to a cost center. So you're still doing the fundamental tactical activities. It is the bridge between the marketing effort, the sales effort, and the finances support, the finance team's support that gets you to where you need to be.
Yeah, I love the way you articulate that. And I will say it's not lost on me the intention in which you talk about strategy versus tactics. And I'll tell you, as a podcast host, Jen, everybody always wants us to have episodes about the sexy tactics of the day. Everybody wants to know about how to implement AI. Everybody wants to know about what's working on social media, all of those. But you've already called out, and I want to come back to this comment because I'd love for you to go deeper here. You already called out, tactics don't mean much without the overarching strategy. Paint that picture for us, because most people don't think about these as such separated functions and things we have to do as executives in our businesses.
Absolutely. So a lot of people, when they hear marketing, they think an ad, or they think a logo, or they think a brand colors, or they think, a trade show. However, those are the results of how you've made the decision as to how you are going to go after your customer. And the decision driven that drives, or the framework that drives which of those communications vehicles you use, because everything I just talked about is a vehicle for communication, is oriented around who the customer is, what keeps them up at night, what are they selling, who are they selling it to, what problems are they solving, and where are they going to go from here to there to there? What are their overarching business goals? So when I'm architecting, I'm not just looking at marketing, I am looking at the entire business framework, because an understanding of how the entire business is built, cross-referenced by an understanding of how the customer, who the customer is and what they want, will breathe life into how am I going to talk to them? Because marketing ultimately boils down to how do you talk to a prospect in a fashion that inclines them to purchase from you, right? So let's say you make the decision that this particular customer spends most of his time at a race car track rather than spends their time, at the computer, because they are a blue collar worker that works on electrical installations. Then you begin to think strategically, where can I put my message in a fashion that finds them? And what does my message actually say to them that would resonate with them and get their attention? And then what am I going to ask them in that message that's going to make them want to pick up that phone or fill out that form or scan the QR code, etc., etc. And once they have done what you've asked them to do, which is your call to action, that's where the vetting and the nurturing begins.
Jen, hearing the way you talk about these things, I will say that as someone listening to you, it's so clear to me that you have power in what you say because you're speaking from experience. And I see way too many newer entrepreneurs and newer business executives that they don't have that body of work to lean on. They don't have those experiences. And so what I find is that they hear advice such as listen to your customer, and I guess I'll interject a Henry Ford quote where Henry Ford once said, if I would have asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And I think that inexperienced marketers, inexperienced entrepreneurs and business owners, they tend to think that that advice means take whatever your customer says. They're the ones who know best. Whereas, Jen, what I'm seeing and hearing in you today is you know best because of your experience. You think about the world through their lens and you make those decisions there, but you're not explicitly saying, do some customer surveys and treat their answers as gospel. Talk to me about that innate understanding that you have of the customers that you work with, because it seems like you're able to tap into that.
I tell people all the time, I can sell anything to anyone. And it's not a brag, it's a fact. And the reason that it's a fact is principally because you take the time to understand that it doesn't matter the title that you carry. It doesn't matter the level of elevation that you have in the world of marketing. At the end of the day, the whole point of marketing is to talk to the people in a fashion that inclines them to purchase from you, which leads into the skill or developing the skill of persuasion, right? But of course, you're not doing that in any way that is untoward. You're doing it in a fashion that aligns with what you're passionate about having them purchase from you, right? So ultimately, yes, understanding everything that you need to understand about the customer is critical. But then the next step is about framing the narrative, right? Oftentimes when we are attempting to sell something, there are a variety of obstacles that a customer has in their mind or challenges that they have in their mind. You're also dealing with human beings, right? So it's also oriented around, do they really even like you? Because many decisions in sales are not based on the step-by-step formula. It's also based on relationship building. So it also ultimately boils down to, how do you frame the persuasive message? How do you build a rapport with the customer? Framing it in a fashion that says, hey, I really care about what you're going through, and I am able to assist you with that, with the product or services that I'm sharing. And if you're able to hit the nail on the head with those two elements, you will build those customer relationships towards a long-term engagement.
Yeah, I feel like this is such a perfect segue and a natural segue to really zoom out and talk about Jen Manswell, the entrepreneur, not just the subject matter expert that you are, because hearing your deep understanding, and actually I think part of what I'm really hearing from you today is foresight. You're not just thinking about what your clients are sitting in today, you're already thinking about what's coming down the road, and that's enabling you to meet them at every step of their journey. And so that's why I feel like it's great to zoom out right now, because I obviously know about Mylene Signature Partners, which is a powerhouse team that you have of specialized firms in branding, demand generation, technology, go-to-market, sales enablement. You have this entire portfolio at your fingertips, Jen, that you very intentionally built and structured in knowing your customers. Talk to us about that side of your business and, of course, your own entrepreneurial and executive mind, because I feel like there's a lot of strategy for us to learn from that setup too.
Well, I'm going to go back to the reference I made earlier that at one point I was a performing artist, and I actually still am to some degree, because as a creative, you can't ever get away from the desire to perform. And I spent many years as a choral performer, a director, an actor, etc. Now, what does that have to do with me being an executive? Hang out with me for a minute. Then I transferred into communications, right? The advertising, the PR, etc., etc. Spent some time at an ad agency, then spent quite a few years in the corporate space. And what I realized is that there is a true cultivation of the communication skills, of the psychological understanding of human behavior, of how our environments, of how our society, of how political structures and societal norms frame and shape perception. So that is what truly informs my overarching approach to anything strategic. I'm always thinking, how is this person going to perceive what is received from us or from my customers? And then how are we going to ensure that the long-term relationship is a powerhouse experience for them? That being said, in the corporate space, I spent an inordinate amount of time working with some wonderful partners, vendors of mine, who I have long-term relationships with. Started working with some of them as far back as 15 years ago, and now they are a part of my Mylene Signature Partner group. And they're the ones who ensures that when I am done working with a corporation to actually build out your architectural blueprint, I give that blueprint to the executors, right? Because I don't just want you to see how this can work. I want to connect you with the absolute best and brightest folks in the world who could actually help you get there, right? And they will hold your hand through the entire process. My goal is to, I probably am going to speak myself out of opportunities here, but my goal is to not have you stay with me forever. It is about teaching you how to fish and then giving you the fishing rods of all of the partners in my portfolio to be able to help you in. And you get to select whichever ones you want to work with as well. So this is how I ensure that the services that we provide are comprehensive. You even have the opportunity to just leverage them rather than me if you feel like your framework is squared away. So that's fundamentally how Mylene Signature Partners work.
It's so cool hearing the way that you've laid that out, Jen, because I feel like it keeps popping up in so many of the insights that you're sharing with us, both short-term thinking and long-term thinking. And I'm always fascinated by founders and entrepreneurs like yourself that have that ability to constantly zoom in and zoom out, to think both short-term and long-term. Because let's face it, a lot of these things that you're sharing with us, these didn't happen overnight. It, of course, took a long time to build it this way. And that involves patience, which not everybody has, but we all need to develop. develop, Jen. And so I really appreciate that part of your story. But talk to us about where your head goes when you do think short-term and long-term. I remember in business school, a lot of professors used to tell us, you got to have a 10-year plan in your business. Now that I've been an entrepreneur for 18 years, I realize it's almost impossible to have a 10-year plan. So many things are going to change between now and 10 years from now, especially at the rate of change that we're seeing today. So how do you navigate time frames? How do you think about time? How do you plan for it? I'm so intrigued to get into your entrepreneurial mind.
You know, if not for the joys and sorrows of working in the corporate space, I don't think that I would have the wherewithal for the constant shifts. And so what we do is we work within the framework of a constant shift. In that you plan, and then you plan for the plan, and then you plan for the contingency of the plan, and then you relinquish the plan because the plan isn't exactly what's working with the plan. So I think what it boils down to is an acceptance that it will change. No matter what, you accept that it would change. And the expertise that you develop over time will help you anticipate where some of the changes may come from, and then other times you won't. And rather than reacting against the shift, which is the natural inclination of a human being, we lean in on the change. We start to learn immediately from the change. We position ourselves to pivot quickly if that change warrants it. And I want to preface this here to say that just because the world is changing doesn't mean you need to be. I will give you a quick example. Digital transformation surrounds us every day, all day long. And this is also quite strategic, right? And there was a period of time where everybody was creating content and everybody was creating content strategies. And I am not in any way saying that content is horrible. Content is fantastic if done well, right? I got a person for that. In any event, but what people started to forget, like some of the messages that I kept getting was, well, we need digital and we need digital and we need digital. And I would push back and I would say, but we forget that some of our customers still use flip phones. We've forgotten that some of our customers just aren't technologically savvy, not because they're not smart, but because that's not their everyday. They don't spend every day in front of their computer or on social media. Some of them are in the fields digging holes to put pumps in the ground, or some of them are in remote settings trying to triage a variable frequency drive in an agricultural field, right? They are not home. So we need to be thinking about how do we get to them in a fashion that cuts through. And what happened, I remember specifically what happened is I went back to print and I started doing direct mail for these customers. And boy, did it get a response. And there are ways to, of course, track that. But the point is I went ahead and I started to cut past the noise. So not dispelling or dismissing digital at all, but making sure that the strategies that we're going after then fully aligns with the customer, and only pivoting with the trends and with the changes if it ultimately makes sense.
Yeah, I love the way you articulate that, especially because I feel like it actually links in so well with what you and I were geeking out a little bit together before we hit record and came on the air is the fact that the world is changing. And one of the biggest changes, of course, is the mass adoption of AI. AI has never been more accessible to all of us as business owners, as professionals, as literally anybody. I think it's so cool when I see my parents using AI. I'm just like, gosh, they didn't even know about this 2 years ago, which is so cool. And so all of those things, Jen, everybody feels like they have to do that. You and I are obviously, we see the very positive aspects in the future that AI is going to lend itself towards. Talk to us about your attitude there, because obviously a lot of businesses will be able to have increased capacity, to ask bigger questions, to kick around more ideas. I'm so curious from your vantage point how you're seeing AI usher in this new era of change.
You know, I've told a lot of people, be still. Take a breath, breathe, think a little bit, because every type of technology is built by a human being. And while the nature of AI is of such where it thinks faster and simplifies processes, AI, like any other tool, is how did I frame it? AI, like any other tool, is only as good as its user. So while the concept of AI is perhaps going to take my job away from me is real because it's going to eliminate some roles, the opportunity is where I focus people on, right? Yeah, that might go away. However, the opportunity now is for you to become skilled in the use of another tool that can then enhance what you have already done. And the only way to be able to do that is to leverage the tool, right? And frame and use it. So for example, there are some AI tools that I have used to ask a few questions and things of that nature. And because I have a certain amount of expertise, I can redirect it and I can coach it on whether or not the answers to the questions that I'm asking are actually correct. Because you run into that, right? You do run into certain imperfections. So you can train it in the direction that you want it to go, right? So for those that are concerned about the tool set, don't be. I would say learn the tool set. You are just as human as the humans that built it, and you, I am sure, can find ways to leverage it to your advantage.
Yeah, so well said. And I feel like that's such a healthy attitude towards all things in life, whether we're talking tech, whether we're talking social media is one of those things we could probably point fingers at. There's a quote out there somewhere. I always get this quote wrong, but essentially the premise of it is that when water is choppy, when it's wavy, we can't see through it. But when the water's calm, all of a sudden we can see through to the bottom. And I think it's so important, which, Jen, I didn't plan on going here with you on the air, but it just feels like something I'd love to call out and hear your perspective and thoughts on. It seems to me like you have a really strong executive filter in a world, just also imagining the amount of clients that you work with across industries. You see so many different types of businesses that you work with and that you work for. I would imagine that your mind is really adept at filtering out noise and saying, hey, there's a ton of stuff that's going on here. I also wish I could execute on 500 of these. I wish my clients could do all of these things, but somehow instead of getting overwhelmed, somehow instead of getting sucked into the chaos, you're able to filter that and you're really able to make sense of all of that chaos. What does that process look like in your head?
I don't like being ruled by fear. I am the weirdo who, when I am afraid of something, goes towards it. So, for example, for my birthday every year, I do something brand new. And so this coming birthday, I'm actually going to go swim with sharks. Why? I'm afraid of swimming in open water. So not only am I going to swim in open water, but I'm going to hang out with seemingly dangerous creatures. But that's another conversation. The thing is, you know, for as much expertise as exists in the corporate world and for as much strength and authority that exists in business, again, it boils down to human beings, right? We're working with human beings. And anytime human beings fall to fear, that's when they find themselves swept away by that troubled water. So I would encourage people to first marshal your fear and leverage that concern that you have to learn about what you are seemingly afraid of, right? Take the moment to learn, press into it and understand it, wrap your head around it. Because oftentimes what you are afraid of tends to be bigger than the reality. So this is how I'm able to stay calm in the midst of chaos. Am I successful at it all the time? Absolutely not. I'm human too, right? But those opportunities are then opportunities for me to learn so that I can manage things moving forward. And if we can rein in that fear, doesn't mean you don't feel it. It simply means you don't decide to act based on that fear. Then you're able to activate your business mind and make more rational decisions. In other words, rather than being reactive to the noise and the cacophony that's coming at you from any changes that are happening in the world, pause, let that wash over you and begin to process how are you going to reposition to win within this environment.
Ooh, I love that answer, but Jen, I don't necessarily love swimming with sharks. I'm going to leave that one to you, but I am going to follow up with you because I'm excited to hear your experiences and your fresh perspectives from that experience. In the interim, I will experience it, so to speak, inside of Apple Vision Pro on the comfort of my own couch. So huge kudos to you.
People have said that to me, so.
Yes, I definitely feel them on that. Well, Jen, I am particularly excited to see how you're going to answer this last question because it's super broad, and I do ask it at the end of every single interview, and that is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? We've gone into so many super valuable things in our conversation here today, and I'm imagining all the entrepreneurs, all the wantrepreneurs over 150 countries. I always think about how cool it is to be able to reach people with our microphones and our voices, Jen, and you have such a powerful voice in that regard. You're one of us. You're a fellow entrepreneur, so what's that one piece of advice that you want to leave them with today?
Your emotions have utility, but they don't have intellect. That's a quote that was borrowed from Dr. Tony Evans. And the reason it's so important is because, again, as a human, you walk down the path of having this vision for your life and you want to see it succeed. And you're offering these amazing services or products that can transform the world. And certain things aren't working and you feel the weight of it and the stress of it. And you have employees and you want your employees to do well, but if you don't do well, other people don't do well. And there's so many highs and lows that a person can go through in the process of trying to build their vision, because that's what you're doing, right? You're building your own vision. But I say again, your emotions have utility. They do not have intellect. What does that mean? Well, the utility of your emotions is going to tell you where you are. They will allow you to express them and to pour them out. There's absolutely nothing wrong in expressing how you feel, but don't let them dictate what you do. Don't let them make your business decisions for you. For example, if there is a feeling of discomfort with regard to customer or with regard to partner, however, you're also feeling excited because this customer or partner has a major following or is well accoladed and has achieved all sorts of public gravitas. Think. Just think. Take the time to think before you act. And it will truly, truly save you. It'll truly save you from a lot of the heartache that some of us actually encounter and go through. But don't overthink. Be ready to take action as well.
Boom. I love that. It's such a delicate balance, Jen. And I feel like so much of our conversation today keeps coming back to finding that happy medium. Even when you talk about thinking, it's so cool to see you you took a breath mid-sentence. And I think that that's a constant reminder for us in the chaos of our days. Take that breath. Think about those things. Give ourselves that time, that space, that environment to set ourselves up for success and not necessarily act on that emotion. Be aware of the emotion. But I love that advice that you've given our listeners here today. Jen, I'll tell you this, in over 1,200 episodes, that is very much the first time someone has gone down that path in answering that question. So I'm so grateful for your wisdom, your insights, your perspectives, and I'm very excited for listeners to go deeper into all the amazing things that you do with your many businesses. So Jen, it's time for you to drop some links on us. For listeners who want to find you online, how do they get a hold of you? Where should listeners go from here?
Well, you can reach out to me on Mylene.com. We are also active on LinkedIn, at Mylene Consulting. And, just say hi, drop a note, inbox me, send me an email. I am happy to be of service where service is needed.
Yes, and listeners, you already know we're making it as easy as possible for you to find those links that Jen just mentioned to you. They are down in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. So you don't have to remember anything. Click right on through from the show notes. It will be very easy to find Jen online. She is certainly not shy, so don't be shy in reaching out to her. Otherwise, Jen, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Brian. Really appreciate it.